Welcome back to the deep dive. We've been looking through the sources you sent over, focusing on some recent political and social developments.
Yes, and a couple of things really jumped out. Actions taken right at the very end of a presidential term.
Exactly. So we thought, let's make this our focus, a chance to really unpack what these actions mean.
Sounds good. The materials highlight two main things, right? First, this increase in Social Security payments, but, well, it's for a specific group, public sector workers.
Right. And the second?
The second is a big one, protecting a really vast area of U.S. shoreline from future fossil fuel extraction.
Okay. So our mission for this deep dive is to get past the headlines, understand the details, the implications, especially with a change in administration possibly coming up.
Trying to get some clarity, cut through the noise.
That's the idea. Deliver the essential info.
So let's jump into that first topic, the Social Security increase.
Okay, so the sources are clear. There's an increase in Social Security payments happening.
But it's important, you said, to know who this is for. Absolutely crucial. This isn't across the board. We're talking about public service workers who are already getting Social Security. So think police officers, firefighters, teachers, that group.
And it's not a minor change affecting just a few people?
No, not at all. The sources mentioned it impacts about 3 million current recipients.
3 million, that's substantial.
It is. And the benefit itself is interesting. It's not just, higher payments going forward. They're also set to receive a full year of back pay, retroactive, right back to the start of 2024.
Wow, okay, so a boost now and a catch-up payment.
Exactly. A future increase and a retroactive adjustment kind of rolled into one.
Now, the source material gives some context here, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Something about previous reductions.
It does. It explains that these same public sector workers actually saw their Social Security payments go down previously.
Why was that?
Seems it was due to some specific legislation that expired maybe a couple of years back.
Ah, I see. So this new action isn't just an increase out of the blue, it's correcting that previous dip first.
That seems to be the case. It reverses that reduction caused by the expired law and then adds an increase on top of restoring that previous level.
Okay, so it's a restoration and an enhancement.
Precisely. It suggests a deliberate move to improve their benefits beyond just fixing the earlier issue.
And the sources frame this politically, don't they? Setting it against other viewpoints.
They do draw a contrast, yeah. It's presented as sort of the opposite of political rhetoric sometimes heard about, needing to cut Social Security.
So the message is, here's an increase, even if it's targeted, versus talk of cuts.
Right. The source emphasizes that while it's not for everyone, it is an increase. And it actually poses a question directly to the reader or listener in our case.
Which is?
Something like, when you look at these different approaches, who is looking out for you? It's clearly meant to make you think about political priorities.
It definitely highlights different philosophies regarding social safety nets, doesn't it?
It does. It brings up that wider point about targeted benefits versus, say, universal ones. Are these easier to pass? Do they create, different classes of support?
Interesting angles to consider. Okay, let's pivot then. The second big topic. Protecting shorelines from drilling.
Yes, this executive order. It's aimed at safeguarding, according to the source, over 625 million acres of U.S. shoreline.
625 million acres, that's huge.
A massive area. And the goal is explicit. Make it off limits for future fossil fuel extraction. No oil, no gas drilling.
And this wasn't just a policy wish list, right? There was a specific legal tool used.
Correct. The action relies on the 1953 Outer Continental Shelf Lands Act.
Okay, what does that act allow?
Well, it gives the president the authority to withdraw federal waters, those offshore areas the U.S. controls from oil and gas leasing. They can basically say, nope, no leasing here.
But here's the really critical part, according to the sources. The law has a quirk, right? About reversing it.
Yes, exactly. This is key.
Okay.
The act clearly says the president can withdraw areas, but it doesn't explicitly say a president can undo that withdrawal. It doesn't grant the power to just reopen those waters later.
So once withdrawn, it's withdrawn. Unless
Congress steps in and passes a new law to change it. That's the interpretation highlighted.
So the source saying it's virtually impossible for a future administration to reverse this on their own. That stems from the specific wording of this 1953 law.
That's the argument presented, yes. It creates a significant legal barrier. Without new legislation from Congress, the protection seems pretty locked in.
That's quite a powerful use of existing
It
legislation.
is. It shows how existing laws can be leveraged to create potentially very durable policy changes, especially on issues like the environment where perhaps getting new laws passed might be difficult.
But the source also raises a question about when this happened, the timing.
Right. It points out this happened very late in the term, and it asks quite directly, why wait? Why wasn't this done earlier?
Suggesting these areas could have been protected sooner?
That's the implication. If the goal was protection, why the delay until the final moments?
So, the source seems to have mixed feelings. Good that it happened, but questionable timing.
Pretty much. It acknowledges the positive aspect, safeguarding this huge area, maybe specifically because of an incoming administration having different ideas.
A buffer, essentially.
A potential buffer, yes. But it still flags the timing as curious, hinting maybe it was a strategic political move to tie the next administration's hands rather than purely an environmental decision made at the earliest opportunity.
Interesting. So let's recap then. We've looked at two major end-of-term actions.
Yep.
First, that Social Security boost with back pay for about 3 million public sector workers, framed politically against talk of cuts.
Correct. Targeted, but presented as an increase.
And second, this massive protection of 625 million acres of coastline using the 1953 Act, making it hard to reverse without Congress.
With questions raised about why it happened so late in the game.
Exactly. Two very different actions, but both significant and both raising, well, different kinds of questions.
One with direct financial impact and political framing, the other with potentially very long-term environmental consequences, but shadowed by questions about its timing and motivation.
It definitely gives us a lot to chew on. Thinking about these specific end-of-term moves and the different ways they're being interpreted, it makes you wonder, doesn't it? What does this tell us more broadly about how priorities are set or how legacies are shaped in American politics right at these transition points?
That's really the core question to mull over, isn't it? Considering these actions, the legal tools used, the timing, what does it reveal about the strategies administrations might employ to exert influence, even as their time is ending? What are the potential long-term impacts of decisions made right under the wire like this?
Plenty to think about there. Thanks for digging into this with us today. We hope this deep dive helped provide some useful context and clarity on these developments.